Warning, this content is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, folks, Big Paul here today. I have a really cool clip from this past weekend's Anabolic Bodybuilding Live where Justin Harris, Kurt Havens, Coach Kolton, and Bodybuilding with Aaron discussed what it takes to grow muscle as far as nutrition and training goes. There's been a lot of recent debate on social media. Is a calorie surplus, a large calorie surplus, actually required for muscle growth? And how much volume is really needed to grow? And if studies really are relevant to our community, most of the studies on muscle hypertrophy aren't on advanced PED users, bodybuilders. It's mostly just newbie people. Now, I know there are some studies that have come in and taken in other people into account. I wish I'd had somebody on this debate on the volume end of the equation, but most of the guys seem to agree that lower volume, higher intensity, progressive overload is probably the most optimal way to train. I tend to be a higher volume trainer these days. I would say moderate to higher volume. I wouldn't say I'm super high volume. I'm not like German high volume. But I have gotten more out of that. Now, I do progress where I can, but there gets to be a certain point when you get to a certain age where continuing to progress weights upward becomes pretty difficult as injuries mount up. And as you get just big and super strong, you're really, really, really risking injury if you try to continue traditional progressive overload. You have to find other ways. Part of it is just the jujitsu of getting the most out of the least weight, learning how to make the weight harder, and actually placing more mechanical tension on the muscle with using less weight through technique. That is something that I have worked hard on, and I think my results show that. Maybe it's the PEDs, who knows? But this is an interesting debate. I think you guys are going to like this video clip. We're going to check it out in just 1 second.
Justin, I need you to listen to a girl called her name's Scientific Stitch on Instagram. Have you guys seen this girl?
I've started following her. Yeah,
I did a live with her. Basically,
fun.
her claim, and she's fucking brilliant, the smartest person I have ever talked to about exercise science. I talked to her for an hour and 30 minutes, and I could have kept going for 3 more hours. Like, it is crazy. She's all about mechanism. She doesn't like outcomes. She likes mechanism. So she understands basically all the mechanism. But her claim to fame right now is that she claims bulking essentially is not efficacious for muscle growth. And that essentially...
I agree with that.
It's not. It's only the second stage of protein translation that's needed. Yeah. There's no connection between food input and muscle growth.
Right. I've been working on how to word this because I want to do like a video on that because I believe in high food volume. I think one of the easiest ways to guarantee someone's going to add a lot of muscular body mass is you basically growth. For me, I never try to add weight on people ever. That's just always as body fat. Muscle growth is just slow. So what I try to do is 2 things. I try to increase their food intake from good sources, provided that they don't get fat. That's it. If they get fat, we don't add food. If they're not getting fat, and we can add food and keep, and then their job is just make progress in the gym. You do those, because at the end of the day, if you're eating 3,000 calories today, and 18 months from now you're eating 5,000 calories, not fat, and you got twice as strong, you have to be bigger. There's, like you can want to be smaller, but there's no other option. No. But I don't believe in bulking at all. I think the scale and body fat is I think almost all of us would be better bodybuilders if a weight scale was never invented.
So basically, like the mediation of progress for you is whether their body fat percentages are changing negatively or positively.
Pretty much, yeah. I just stepped back at one point and thought, okay, if I take a person and they're eating 3,000 calories today and they're, whatever trackable metric they use in the gym, whether it's progressive overload, some type of intensity, a pace, set volume, whatever, if they're at some set workload in the gym and they're eating 3,000 calories, and at some point in the future we have them eating 5,000 calories at the same body fat, and they've improved as far as where their metrics are in the gym, I don't see how they don't make progress in muscle mass. So it just cuts out any guesswork. It's like, we know we can focus on this. This is something we can make clear, obvious progress on. We've added calories. You haven't added body fat, and we know you're going to you're going to have more muscle, bigger muscles. But if we just try to add weight, I mean, because even like a Nick Paul, what did he's gained 100 pounds, 120 pounds since 2012. That's 12 years ago. That's 10 pounds a year. It's less than a pound a month. And your weight can change 3 to 5 pounds a day easy, just if you have extra sodium or extra water. So on any given day, your weight fluctuates more than 6 months of muscle growth. So using the scale to track progress for muscle growth is completely useless, because 6 months are wiped out in an instant, whether or not you drank a lot of water or had a lot of sodium or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And Kolton, if you think about it, so from training alone, the only cause of muscle growth is mechanical transduction. There's no calorie requirement there. That's only in the translation of DNA. That nowhere in the human body does it require energy for mechanical transduction to occur. Right? The 3 pathways from steroids are slightly different, but that's a whole different conversation. The rate limit, so there's several rate limits in muscle growth in humans, but the ultimate rate limit is how many stem cells you have. Can you take a nuclei from a stem cell and apply it to this muscle fiber? So that's why things like growth hormone work as we age, because you run out of stem cells. It's not, but again, that doesn't require, there's nowhere that stem cell proliferation requires calories. Right? Unfortunately, that's I gained 100 pounds. I never went over single digit body fat. You don't need it.
Yeah, that's what
wrong. It's like what Justin's saying. Where people go wrong is they look at the total calories. Like, well, he's eating 6,000 calories. Yeah, but if your maintenance is 5,800 calories, you're only slightly above it. You're not. That's like, for me, my maintenance is super high. The amount of food I eat is not me in an excess. It's me in a slight excess. If I ate 3,000 calories, I'd be 140 pounds.
Right.
It's like, Justin, who cares about the scale? You can have the look. Getting fat is honestly going to make muscle growth worse.
Yeah.
You become insulin resistant, and your body's just going to become very efficient at storing fat. The human body
you aromatize estrogen, more estrogen with a higher body fat. I mean, like every marker for And so go ahead. Sorry.
No, go
ahead. That's why I always believe your gear doses should be highest when trying to get leaner. Because it's especially why blood antigens are high, or especially why they're climbing. Your rates of muscle growth, muscle protein synthesis is going to be really high, even in a deficit. If your blood antigen levels are sky high, especially climbing, you're going to be building muscle even in a deficit. So you get a double impact where those calories that are going to muscle growth, which is a small amount of calories. I mean, if we're really talking about it. Yeah, but it's calories that it's actually increasing fat loss, because those calories have to be made up somewhere else, and they're going to be made up from lost fat.
Yeah, and like Justin said before, because people argue this all the time, but it's not correct. As a muscle fiber gets bigger, a muscle fiber has to get stronger. A muscle fiber only produces force. That's what a muscle fiber does in its most simple way. If you're bigger, you're stronger. Now that doesn't mean that doesn't mean through your training that you're constantly hitting PRs, because a lot of bodybuilders don't train that way, but you're definitely stronger. You're stronger now than you were with 50 pounds ago. Right. Whether you train that way or not, you have to be. You can't get bigger without getting stronger. It's not on like an equal. It's not on like this like scale. Like every pound increases your bench press by 10 pounds or something. But you have to. That's
right.
Yeah. Otherwise, powerlifting, we're not weight classes. I mean, and that's the extreme. But I think the only weight class that has higher all-time totals than the weight class above them might be maybe 220 or 242. The all-time world record might be higher at 220 than 240. But every across the board, other than that, you go up a weight class, let's go up.
Okay, that's really interesting. Another thing that she's gotten a lot of flack for is talking about that the mechanisms to hypertrophy are very simple, and in fact, it's just the fact of tension as opposed to
you have 3 other mechanisms through steroids or hormones, we could say.
Correct. Yeah.
So you have mechanical transduction that is only from exercise. Then through steroids, you have P13K, you have which is like mTOR, you have the androgen receptor, and you have IGF-1 receptor. So where you see where bodybuilders go wrong, this is going to aggravate a lot of people, but it's the truth. If you have plateaued in your muscular size and you're training, you're doing pump training, you're doing high volume, you're doing 12 sets of lateral raises, you're doing all the silinuts, and you're never using progressive overload, you're just leveraging the steroids. Your limiting factor is not because you're never experiencing mechanical tension. So that the only way you're going to get past that plateau is either increase the drug load or actually start training correctly and get bigger. That's why Dorian Yates was probably one of the biggest guys ever because he did both. He leveraged the drugs correctly and he leveraged his training correctly, right? So I would say guys like Flex Wheeler probably would have been bigger if he actually trained correctly. I hate to say that, but you watch these guys curl on the 30-pound dumbbells on a ton of gear. That's his genetics allow him to get bigger. And that's the steroids growing it. That's not the weights.
I think that's the big problem, though, is because there are certain people with such amazing genetics, like a Flex Wheeler, who get so much adaptation from the non-tensile strength aspect, from the two other aspects that people can, and then also the people who don't get much from that and are really interested in bodybuilding are going to have to focus on the strength aspect, the training aspect, and so you get the case where you can be like, well, you know, all these top bodybuilders don't lift heavy, and all these guys that lift really, really heavy aren't the best bodybuilders. But it's really a secondary mechanism where the guys who don't get the two other responses very, very highly, like a Flex Wheeler, have to try to make up for it by through training and getting very strong. But if you take someone who's got the great genetics and they train and they get brutally strong, you get a Ronnie Coleman.
Mm-hmm. So the part that confuses me, though, and which is hard because she's also claiming that muscle damage is counterintuitive to muscle growth because of the inflammatory response, which I agree with. But then how do you equate adequate tension without a surplus of damage?
So damage tends to occur in the negative. So when you stretch a muscle, basically you open the ion channels up and calcium floods in, and that can cause damage. That also causes fatigue.
That's
you
what
don't ever want to force. Yeah. That's correct. I mean, I hate to say this. This is the case with steroids, case of food, case of training. We understand these mechanisms. These are known. We're not living in the 1970s where we didn't know the androgen receptor existed. These are known. Just because people don't understand them doesn't mean they don't exist, right? I'm not a physicist. There's lots of stuff that Justin knows and understands. I don't understand. It doesn't mean gravity is not real, right? Unfortunately, you don't have to believe in mechanical tension, but you're wrong. It is what causes muscle growth. The pump is counterintuitive as well because you're now flooding the muscle with all sorts of metabolites that irritate the muscle. You don't want to pump. You know,
I think you can apply it's the genetics, and you can look at all other sports. Like we were talking about Lawrence Taylor. You know, you can think, you know, like a guy like that can get away with so much more. You know, that you can start to think that maybe practicing doesn't matter that much, or that, you know. But when you get someone who's got elite genetics for their position in a sport, and they put in the work, you get like a Tom Brady. You know, it's just that like the elite level genetics are so high. You know, you look like basketball, like someone like a LeBron James. You know, even though obviously practicing and, you know, these secondary things are going to improve basketball, my natural genetic gifts for basketball are so much lower than his. There's no way I can make up for it. You know, it's kind of like, it's like that. Some people's just their genetic gifts for response to gear and things like that are just so incredibly high that they can get away with getting minimal, you know, stimulus from the heavy lifting. But if you take someone who's got that and they train hard, you get like a Ronnie Coleman. Kai Green was very strong. Jay Cutler was even really strong. You know,
yeah.
Dorian. That's all I'm saying. It's not that you can't grow with the just drugs. Clearly, that Big Basin proved that. These guys 600 milligrams testosterone. They sit on the couch. You're just leveraging those 3 anabolic pathways. You're not using mechanical tension, but their growth would be super limited. They didn't continue to grow as they stayed on 600 milligrams test. And you see that with bodybuilders. If they don't train properly, they'll reach the maximum size, and that's as big as they'll get if they just keep doing bullshit in the gym. Right? Gyms are loaded with guys that don't know how to train that do anabolics.
Actually, Brandon Curry is a perfect case study for that, because Brandon Curry was known as not a heavy lifter, not a hard trainer. You know, I mean, I remember hearing stories that he would do like 1-arm rows with the 40-pound dumbbells, but then Oxygen Gym gets him. And what happened? He's over there and he's forced to train hard. And if anyone remembers that photo, it's like a rear lat or a rear double bi next to Kai Green. Yeah. He went from that to at his best. And that was the difference when he added that third component. But it didn't mean he wasn't a really good bodybuilder without it, because his genetics were just so above most people.
Yeah.
So this is where, interestingly, you have to ask, like, where did all of these people proclaiming stretch mediated hypertrophy is the thing, right? Like the Team Full ROM, like RP running.
Well, it depends on the muscle. Certain muscles benefit from full stretch and others don't, right? Like your chest, your hamstrings, your quads, triceps don't. Like, it just depends on the structure of the muscle has inserted. It doesn't mean full range of motion is needed for all things. Triceps actually benefit more from a partial, right? Lats, the same with the lats. If you do a pull up, the very top of it's actually your chest.
Yeah, you're not.
Your back. So it's like your lats in this motion don't, but in this motion they do.
I see.
But again, I don't think people should focus on that minutia, right? Most guys that are focusing on silly stuff like that probably just need to reevaluate their diet, their gear, their overall training, not so much like
the people that are focusing on that are the ones that become coaches.
Yeah,
because those who can do, those who can't have to learn everything and teach it.
Yeah, like mechanical tensions, it's not a thermostat. It's on. It's been experienced or it hasn't been experienced. It's not like every set you do, you get more mechanical tension. Once that electrical signal's there, it's there. You can't get more. In fact, every set you do that goes down, not more. Like if you look at chart, by the time you get to 5 sets, the growth you're getting is less and less and less. You're almost at nothing at that point.
Right.
I think that's where
I'm glad you said 5 sets. I always use the argument for why more training isn't better. And I say if you take someone who's never trained a day in their life and you have them start doing one exercise for 1 set for chest, they're going to grow obviously more than not doing anything. And you can be pretty confident saying that if I have them do 2 sets, they're going to get more accelerated growth than 1. And if you get to 3, 4, and I say by the time you get to 5 sets, can you, on your mother's life, can you guarantee that if you have them do a 6th set for each body part, they will absolutely 100% of the time grow faster than doing 5 sets? And if you're wrong, your mother dies. And I think people, you look at it that way, people are like, holy shit, I don't know that I can guarantee that. Why am I doing 20 sets?
Remember they did that German volume training thing where they were showing it didn't do anything. And they had the one group do the 5 sets and they had the one group do the standard 10. And the 5-set group grew twice as much as the 10-set group.
Yeah, after a certain point, you're really just increasing the recovery workload that you have to. I think almost all of us, anyone who trains hard, and that's the hard one, because I've trained with a lot of people who say they train hard who don't train hard, and so hard is obviously subjective. But if you train hard, I think all of us are doing more workload than our nutrition can fully cover and grow from. I think all of us are already training to a level where the training is not our limiting factor. It's the peripheral stuff. It's are we supplying them enough nutrients to recover and grow from it properly, rest, whatever.
I think that's where one of the things like people, I do think young guys get confused about. They do think that, and this is like one of my pet peeves, is like guys get obsessed with the weight on the end of the bar. And it's like, I don't think they understand how leverage and momentum and things like that play into it as well. So like, I can take a 150-pound dumbbell and heave it around on rows, and I'm not actually getting more mechanical tension than I would if I used the 100
Yeah,
pounds.
that's the difference between, if you're lifting more weight because the muscle got stronger, or are you moving more weight through space because you've improved your mechanical leverage?
Right.
And it's tricky because some movements you can't bypass the fact that if you got stronger, the muscle got stronger. Like a deadlift. I'm not saying deadlift's a great bodybuilding movement, but it's an easy for this case. It's easy to look at, because the only way you're going to get maximally strong in a deadlift is if you make basically your lumbar and you bend back in your glutes the prime mover. If you make your hamstrings the prime mover, you're not going to be maximally strong. So to get strong in a deadlift, you're kind of forced to use the correct muscles. And then also you can increase in small increments. If you're doing 500-pound deadlifts and you add a 2.5-pound plate on each side, you've added 1% to the bar. That's a reasonable expectation of progressive overload. If I'm doing 50-pound dumbbell curls, the next step up is 55. That's a 10% increase. So if I do try to progressive overload and I go to the 55s, the only way I'm going to get them is by using my biceps less, because I'm using more momentum. So by progressive overloading in that way, I'm actually working my biceps less. Now, if you could add like paper clips, or if you could find a way to add 1% to a 50-pound dumbbell, then you could keep the same form and you could make like a more linear progression with progressive overload. But in so many squats, another example, it's almost guaranteed that if you get stronger quickly in the squat, it's because you're working your quads less. Widen your stance, more flatter soles, put your glutes back, put the bar lower, rested longer between sets, put your belt tighter, put your knee wraps tighter. There's so many things that are, it's almost to where it's far harder to get stronger in the squat by making your quads stronger than it is just to become better mechanically leveraged. And so, like, especially young kids, it's so hard for them to differentiate between getting stronger in a movement or making a muscle stronger. Getting stronger in movement means you were just able to move a weight through space better, regardless of what muscles are working. Making a muscle stronger is totally different, and the movement is just a tool to activate that.
That's
Absolutely.
the jujitsu of lifting weights that drives 100%. Me nuts with young guys. I remember Dante Trudell telling me this a long time ago when he worked with me. He's like, "Did you get better at cheating, or did you actually progress?"
Yeah, it's good.
That was always his thing. He was a stickler for like having the exact same parameters for how you move the weight, like the form, the time, the time, that you spent on the positive and the negative, all of it had to be exactly the same. You had to control all of that and then progress the weight from there.
He's who I learned from to like actually when I'm tracking the weight I'm lifting to like track how I set up the movement to like if it's a bench or a mechanical movement where I can change the machine, like note where I put the machine at what points and where I placed my feet and like take those notes because you can replicate them the next time. And it's like actually a really effective trick.
I'm pretty sure he is an engineer.
Recorded a reel. Yeah, Dante. Well, I don't know if he got his degree, but he was definitely an engineering student.
It's like failure too, Justin. It's like you can't work past failure. There's no such thing. What most guys do is they change their leverage, right? Like, or you get a spotter. You're not now at all. You can't go over 100%. Once you failed, it's failure. By changing the leverage, like he's saying, now you're just using other muscles to move it. That's how I generally judge failures. Once you start shifting your position, like on a preacher curl, once you start leaning more forward, you've already failed. Now you're just making it easier.
Yeah, and there also seems to be some pretty compelling evidence now that you might be better off leaving a rep in the tank because of the recovery demands and the muscle injury that it causes. Yeah. You can see the curve, like on the studies, you can see the curve where it flattens out about 1 rep in reserve, 1 to 2. I don't remember exactly, but.
Only reason why I don't recommend that because most guys don't know what failure is.
Yeah, they don't know what failure is.
Unless you've trained hard before, how do you tell someone leave 2 reps in reserve? What does that even mean? You see it.
Yeah,
people all the time. You're like do 15, they do 15 and they stop. Like,
well, you all know if you get the leg press loaded up, if you get somebody there screaming at you, you can do like 5-6 more reps than you think you can.
That's the Dante trick, right? So he says, you want to know what failure is? He says, get into a leg press. Pick a weight that you think you can do 12 reps with, and then do 30 without stopping.
Yeah.
And then you'll figure out what failure really feels like when you have to drag yourself there.
You learn too. Like a Widowmaker on squats, you pick a weight, you can do 12 reps. It's a 5-minute set. You get to 12 reps, and that's a struggle. Then you stand there for 10 seconds, you get 1 more rep. You stand there stuck in air for forever, and you just keep going and going, and you'll get to 20. But I mean, that's true failure, but there's no way you can build a workout around that because that one set, you're done.
That's just purely a test, and it's just test yourself that one time. But I've had a fair few conversations with a lot of the guys over at the Olympia, and do you know what the one common conversation talking about training and what's been the biggest deciding factor in people's progress over the last couple of years? And everyone had exactly the same story.
Logbook.
I'm lifting way less weight. I'm just lifting it better. So everyone's just moving way more towards accuracy. They're leaving the big weights behind.
I wish that was worded better though, because like young guys will hear that and they just hear less weight. They're not. They're moving less weight through space, but they're putting more load on the correct muscle.
Yeah. You got to if you're going from 5 plates to 2 plates, that 2 plates better still feel like 5 plates.
Yeah.
But directed in the proper way.
Yeah. But the mechanical tension that you're actually experiencing is probably more because you've improved your form and your technique.
For sure.
I would have guessed the answer was Increlux, but I guess.
That's it. What's your guys' opinion on frequency? Leveraging as much frequency?
That's what I was going to ask as well, because it's like, okay, so if the goal is absolute tension, then how many times can we apply a tension within a given unit of time without causing damage, right?
As much as you can recover from, I guess.
But that would imply damage.
I had my best progress over the last.
That's where the programming comes into play. Very careful programming, but that's worked for me massively this year.
It's probably in the volume, how many sets you're doing. Right.
I had my best progress of my life over the last few years, training everything twice a week.
But you brought the volume down each session, though.
I do this, though. I do more of an RP style training where I progress the volume over. Well, I haven't been lately. I've been doing flat volume where I would progress the volume over the blocks, and then I would push the weights up on the next block and then progress the volume again. So it's still progressive overload. So like I'd start off with maybe 2 sets an exercise at let's say at 100 pounds, and then the next, I'd progress that up to 5 over a 5-week block, and then the next block we'd reset, go up to 110 pounds, progress that up. And I really, like, one of the things I did too, because I just kept getting hurt. That's another problem. Sometimes you just get so damn strong that I was inclining like in my 30s, early 30s, I was inclining 405. Like how much more are you going to go past that, right? Without getting hurt.
Adding a rep though feels progressive overload. Adding a set is not. So you can check, you know what I mean? You don't have to go up in weight necessarily.
Sure.
I do a little more volume than most people do, and it's really has helped me. I don't know.
Well, the other thing you have is, and I'm not an expert in this. It's not my area of interest, so I might say some things incorrectly. But sarcoplasmic growth, the majority of your muscle is non-contractile tissue. The problem is that's probably also the part of the muscle that you can affect the least as far as overall growth. But there is going to be some adaptation, capillary density, your blood, more blood volume to the area, your blood vessels increase in diameter. And so if the majority of your muscle is non-contractile tissue, there is some adaptation there, but it's also probably even more genetically linked to what kind of progress you can make there. And then clearly I would have to assume that the sarcoplasmic aspect is much more able to be adapted or affected than the myofibrillar.
Well,
it's not my area of interest.
Yeah,
So
the new research shows that they occur at the same time. So even if like under a microscope, even if sarcoplasm is growing faster, myofibrillar is right after it. So it's always the tandem. What you probably see when guys are like powerlifters versus bodybuilders, again, when there's steroids at play, you might be seeing type 1 growth that you just wouldn't get naturally, right? Where a bodybuilder also is not working that place. So there's probably different fibers that might be experiencing hypertrophy, but it's not necessarily just sarcoplasm on its own that can't occur on its own without myofibrillar following it.
So the culmination of all this is also that things like cluster sets or widowmakers or myo-rep sets, these are all kind of, in a sense, junk volume.
They're junk. They don't. There's no extra growth that comes from any modifier that you wouldn't get from a straight set to failure. Now,
but I think even that, I think you can.
Training, you're not talking about drugs. Like that's where it gets confusing, right? Because drugs you're talking about 3 separate pathways. You're not talking about from a pure exercise point of view. Drop sets, rest pause, myo reps. None of them will produce more growth than a straight set.
I think the other thing.
Sorry, go on, Justin.
No, you can go ahead.
I was just going to say they're great tools to be able to use in certain situations. Like, for instance, we're talking earlier about people not being able to train to failure. They don't know what that feels like. Asking someone to do that in a straight set is very difficult. You ask someone to do that in a rest pause or a myo set, they will get way closer to failure because they have those little breaks along the way. It's a great way to achieve things like that. Or efficiency of timing within training, getting your training more compressed, so you still end up with that same amount of sort of stimulus across the session, but within way less time. So they have their place. But yeah, essentially, if you've got the time, a good old straight set is going to win most of the time.
Yeah. And I also think that it might be junk volume in that it's not directly contributing to muscle growth, but I think there's some indirect aspect where even hard gainers, people who are trying to gain weight, if you actually view their body fat, their off-season body fat is going to be higher than like a Nick Walker or these professional bodybuilders that walk around in very good condition year-round. And that junk volume does burn calories, which gives you a little bit more buffer, because I think for the vast majority of bodybuilders, the issue is, and you can go to any contest where no one's in actual contest shape, the biggest issue for competitive physique competitors is body fat, really. Everyone worries about muscle mass, but there's like 20 mass monsters on Earth. That's it, and so we're all like focused on that. And that is obviously what the elite part of bodybuilding is. But you go to any state level show and it's conditioning that wins the show always. No one's winning on mass at the state level. And so anything that can help keep you leaner throughout the year, even if it's junk volume, as long as it's not directly inhibiting growth, I think has some net positive.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with using it for something from a pure it's not doing anything. But I heard Arnold. If I'm going for 6 reps and I don't hit, let's say I hit 4, I might reduce the load and get another reps out. There are places where you can utilize it, but I think what you see like the young broccoli head kids do, it's like superset and stuff and constant drop sets, like that's just garbage. All they're doing is creating fatigue. right?
I heard Arnold mention
what's that thing all the college kids always would do, or a preacher curl, and the other guy, there's no weight in the bar, and there's no weight in the bar, and the other guy, and it's like 30 sets of complete, positive, like failure and negative, and you've never seen someone with bigger than 15-inch arms doing that, but every kid in college can't wait to get off bench press and then go. God, they got some name for it. It's like I've named after a sports team or a university or something. I always hear.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I remember Arnold, it was recently, he said, it was funny because he talked about the 70s, how they didn't do cardio back then. He said if we wanted to get in shape, we just lifted weights more. But that's what they did back then. They would lift for like 2-3 hours instead of doing cardio.
Yeah.
Seems to be coming back now. I think Martin's started off a new trend again of no cardio, right? No cardio.
Yeah, Martin doesn't do cardio, right?
That goes through that. That's so cyclical because Meadows, if you guys remember around 2015, 2014, it was the no cardio phase too. Every client, I want to, so here's a show I want to do, but I want to try that no cardio thing. I'm like, yeah, me too. That's awesome. But you've never been in shape before, so let's worry about that first.
Maybe that's how I get by with such little cardio, because like
you have higher volume.
During prep, I'm in, if I do my posing and everything, I'm in the gym for 2 hours, sometimes 2.5.
So we can kind of therefore induce two things: that intensity techniques aren't directly going to benefit muscle growth, but that also excess volume isn't necessarily benefiting muscle growth. It's just more so mediating metabolic rate.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, that sounds like a fair assessment.
Yeah. I just think when guys are new, they focus too much on that kind of stuff. Like they should just learn how to lift.
Yeah. Everyone focuses on more training. It's like, try to tell the young guys, it's like, look, none of us hate going to the gym. If doing 100 sets or training chest three times a week is what worked, that's what we'd be doing. None of us are none of us are only lifting 5 days a week or 4 days a week because we can't wait for those 2 or 3 off days. We would love to be in there every day. It's the one thing we get, like you ask a bodybuilder, what day is it? They don't say Tuesday, they say chest day, So the reason people aren't doing insanely high volume is because it doesn't work. But every kid, comes around thinking that that's what's going to get them there faster, as if every guy who has devoted their life to the sport just doesn't want to train more,
Yeah.
What was it? Paul Carter, I think he was saying, like for strength, you'd want more volume because you're training the CNS and you're learning movement patterns and all that stuff. But for bodybuilding, actually, probably you're impairing your progress with more volume.
Yeah, I think that's really nuanced too, because if you do like Olympic lifting where it's incredibly technical, it's not even so much, the strength doesn't even necessarily come from
it's technique.
Yeah, it's just so precise.
Even in bodybuilding for beginners, if I want them to learn and practice a lift, I'll make them do it more times.
Yeah,
the intensity and stuff like that can come later on. Let's first get them to actually learn how to do the lift right.
Yeah.
That might take an extra few reps and a few sets,
Yeah. It's also frustrating because a lot of research that does support like higher like there was that study that came out with 52 sets of legs is optimal per week.
Right. If you only train legs once a week or something. Like
yeah. But it's also in like people who are untrained. So of course they're going to respond. Yeah.
The study group is not bodybuilders.
They have 8 people who have never trained before and just
they haven't do 52 sets of Widowmakers.
Right.
Is that what it was? It was total newbies in that study? It was,
it was a group. I think it was 8. The study population was 8 individuals, and it was untrained individuals.
So pure newbie gains then.
Yeah. But that's a lot of the data out there. The inclusionary criteria is even if they're experienced, they consider experience they've been training for a year, which is like I would still consider that a far.
Well, how are you going to get experience? How you're going to find a bodybuilder and say, hey, for 6 weeks you can't do any of your normal training. You have to only do what we do.
That's true.
Be like, no, I want to improve the body of science. Is
there a serostim at the end of this?
Yeah. How much you pay me? I'll do 6 weeks of
anything. How do you get them off drugs? How do you standardize? You're like, you all can have to use the same thing now.
Yeah, that's true.